for a full day of live coverage, and on YouTube and Facebook for a full day's coverage. Benin Decides, WADR covers. This is the live coverage of the 2026 presidential election in Benin. It's 2 minutes past the top of the hour here in Dakar and 2 minutes past 9 in Cotonou. Good morning to you, wherever you're tuning in. It's our pleasure to welcome you to the live coverage of the 2026 presidential election in Benin. Welcome to the first English edition of the election coverage, and we are coming to you live on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar. And we are also streaming live on YouTube and Facebook. We're also on Eutelsat 16A on the frequency of 12687 megahertz. I am Imo Edit, and I won't be doing this alone as I do have Veronique and Joy co-anchoring this edition.
Indeed, we thank you for joining us on this coverage of the presidential elections in Benin. In the coming hours, we will bring you all the happenings, interviews, feature reports, profiling, and minute-by-minute update of what is currently happening in Benin with regards to the elections.
And much later in the coverage, we'll be having guests and analysts joining us in the studio to look at the election issues in Benin and the expectations from the outcome. We'll also be joined by correspondents on standby and other analysts across Cotonou and other regions of Benin. It's indeed a full package. Just to also inform you that the first part of this English broadcast will end at 9 o'clock to pave way for the French team to continue with the coverage. Welcome once again, everyone. It's Benin Decides 2026 and WADR is covering. Now, the 2026 vote is the 8th election in the democratic era of the Republic of Benin. So today, all eyes are on this country as citizens head to the polls to elect their next president in a vote seen as a key moment for the country's democracy, which survived an attempted coup on December 7, 2025, when a group calling itself the Military Committee for Refoundation attempted to overthrow the outgoing President Patrice Talon. Well, you will agree that while Benin has historically been among the most stable democracies in Africa, opposition leaders and human rights organizations have accused Talon of using the justice system as a tool to sideline his political opponents after taking office in 2016 and changing electoral rules. Well, in November, a constitutional reform extended presidential terms from 5 to 7 years, established a partially presidential appointed Senate, and further raised the bar for opposition parties to enter parliament.
Indeed, from Ali Bowie to Parakou and the Atlantic, voters, about 8 million people are expected to turn out in these numbers, deciding not just the leadership of Benin, but also the direction of governance, economic reforms, and national unity in the years ahead.
So in the first half of this broadcast, we will link up with reporters across the country, as we mentioned, for a feel of what is obtaining at various polling centers and as voters begin queuing to cast their ballots. So don't forget, it's also full live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. Now, the outgoing President Talon, who is 67, is barred under the Constitution from running again after 2 terms in power, and will step down with a legacy of mixed results, economic growth, but also a clampdown on the opposition and critics. Benin, with a population of 14 million, has also seen increasing numbers of attacks in its north as Sahel-based armed groups expand their territories towards the Atlantic coast. Well, Benin is sandwiched between its bigger neighbor Nigeria to the east and Togo to the west. The coastal country has increasingly gained attention as a tourist destination as more people from African diaspora flock to its windy beach towns. A former French colony, Benin retains French as its official language. Fon, Yoruba, Bariba, and Fulfude are among the largest local languages spoken in the country. Well, Benin transitioned to democracy after the 1990 National Conference of Benin. Since then, presidential elections have been held regularly: 1991, 1996, 2001, 2006, 2011, 2016, 2021, and now 2026. Well, so about 8 million eligible voters will choose a president for the next 7 years. Candidates will need to secure at least 50% of the vote. Otherwise, a runoff will be called on May 10 between the two top candidates.
The main opposition party, the Democrats, failed to get enough lawmakers to support a candidate. So it is not on the presidential ballot. It also failed earlier to win any parliamentary seat in Benin's parliament. So a lot of issues happening currently in the country.
Well, so what are some of the issues that will determine the outcome of the vote today? Let's quickly share with you before we bring the profiles of the candidate. First of all, economic growth. Now, sustained for a decade, has been among Talon's strongest achievements, and Beninese will be looking for a president who can sustain or improve on that. Well, Benin's economy grew by 7% in 2025, according to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, making it one of the region's steadiest economies. Well, that's driven by investment in trade, agriculture, and infrastructure, including port expansions in Cotonou. On the other hand, benefits have not been equally distributed across the country, as poverty remains widespread in rural areas, especially in the poorer north.
Another key issue to consider is the rising insecurity and political instability in the country. Recall that Benin made headlines in December 2025 after a group of military officers attempted but failed to seize power. About 100 alleged coup planners are still in jail awaiting trial. The coup leaders' key complaints were the deteriorating security situation in the northern part of Benin, where Al-Qaeda and ISIL affiliated armed groups from neighboring Sahelian countries have increasingly launched attacks on communities. They also said soldiers were neglected on the front line. Benin's north is close to the tri-border area, a hotbed for armed violence. Lack of security cooperation with Niger and Burkina Faso, both now led by military leaders, has also worsened the situations. Well, candidate Wadani has promised to defend the north by creating municipal police forces to guard border towns.
Well, from security issues to the shrinking democratic space, which has gotten experts talking now, Talon has been accused of dragging the country back into an era of autocracy, especially after authorities shut down costs of living protests in April 2024. Beninese treasure the country's reputation as one of West Africa's most stable democracies in recent times, but critics say that has changed under Talon, and opposition groups accuse him of using the justice system to undermine other parties. Now, a constitutional reform in November extended presidential terms from 5 to 7 years. It also established grounds for the president to nominate candidates to the Senate, which further raised the bar for opposition parties to enter parliament. Now, in January's parliamentary election, Talon's two allied parties controlled all 109 seats in the National Assembly. Well, rights groups like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have meanwhile accused Talon's government of cracking down on dissent through arbitrary detentions, restrictions on demonstrations, and pressure on independent media.
So let's bring you profiles of the candidates. Romuald Wadani has campaigned on promises to improve the lives of Beninese and outperform outgoing President Patrice Talon. Romuald Wadani has campaigned on these promises, and as a front-runner in this presidential race, the former minister has pledged to eradicate extreme poverty and reshape public policy to better support grassroots development. Abdullah Hassan tells us.
Romuald Wadani was born 49 years ago in Lokossa in southwestern Benin. He is widely recognized in the global finance community as a renowned chartered accountant. Since April 2016, President Patrice Talon has entrusted him with the Ministry of Economy and Finance. He later strengthened his position by becoming Minister of State and taking charge of the corporation portfolio. Romuald Wadani studied at the Grenoble Graduate School of Business and later at Harvard Business School, specializing in international finance, taxation, and private equity. Long before being called upon by Talon in 2016, he built an international career working in France and the United States. There he advised multinational corporations, governments, and financial institutions on financial structuring, tax reforms, and resource mobilization. Wadani is one of the initiators of several economic reforms aimed at cleaning up public finances, modernizing tax and customs administration, and improving budget transparency. Under his leadership, Benin returned to international financial markets through notable Eurobond issuances. Investors have responded positively to his approach, strengthening the country's credibility. After 10 years in office, the minister, now a candidate, acknowledges that extreme poverty exists in Benin and says he will tackle it if elected.
Extreme poverty means waking up without knowing what you will eat, lacking access to clean water, basic health care, a home or a job. The number of people living in such conditions has become unacceptable. But just as we have soon, we can rise and find our path. We are also capable of tackling the challenge of extreme poverty.
Under Wadani, Benin has recorded improvements in its macroeconomic indicators, a development praised by the World Bank and International Monetary Fund (IMF). He believes his next mission is to redefine public policy.
Le pays tout entier sera divisé en 6 régions et schématiquement,
The country will be recognized into 6 regions broadly based on the former departments. These include Atakora Donga, Bogu, Aliburi, Zoo Collins, Wimi Plateau, Atlantic, Littoral, and Monokofu. Authorities will be established for each region with the goal of creating tailored development plans. Each region will build its own economic ecosystem based on its strengths and expertise.
Basé sur ses atouts, ses savoir-faire.
Romuald Wadani says he intends to continue the policies of President Patrice Talon. However, the high cost of living and the lack of opportunities for many young people remain key concerns among the population.
That was Abdullah Hassan giving us the profile of Romuald Wadani, who is with the ruling coalition.
Now, the second candidate in the race is Paul Humbe, representing the opposition party Kauri Forces for an emerging Benin's FCBE. Now, he is campaigning on a promise of political change after 2 terms of President Patrice Talon. Well, here is his profile by Sankuli Janko.
Paul Humpe began his political career in Bopa, where he served as mayor from 2008 to 2015. A former school teacher, he focused on effective local governance and community development during his tenure. His work caught the attention of then-President Thomas Boniai, who later appointed him Minister of Culture toward the end of his second term, giving Humpe a national platform. Although his camp lost the 2016 presidential election, he remained active within the forces Kauris for the Emerging Benin, FCBE, a party close to Boniai, and became its national executive secretary in 2019. His role in the opposition led to his appointment as leader of the opposition in 2021. Last October, he was selected as the FCBE candidate for today's presidential election.
You know there are many complaints and rampant poverty. We came to restore hope. Development must first and foremost be human. Between beautiful gardens and providing clean water for the population, our ideology compels us to prioritize providing clean water for the people. You know how difficult it is today to have even 2 meals a day in Benin. You know how access to healthcare remains a major problem for vulnerable populations. You know that our education system is failing and it is not producing young people suited to our current situation.
Paul Hongpei promotes a political agenda focused on development, national unity, and governance based on dialogue and close engagement with citizens.
We tried to connect with our people, listen to them, and evaluate the past 10 years together. Based on our discussions, we developed solutions that the people of Benin will allow us to implement. We believe our completely shattered democracy must be rebuilt. It is our hallmark, and we are proud to be a truly democratic country. What have we become? And look how morality has vanished from the forum.
During the campaign, he repeatedly criticized what he described as the massive resources used by his opponent to court voters. He also warned that trade unionists backing his rival, Romuald Wadani, would become his opponents if he is elected.
Sankole Janko there profiling the opposition candidate there, Paul Hongpei of the party Kauri Forces for an Emerging Benin FCBE. Well, let's cross over now to Cotonou, where we have Gafudu Sopoho on standby to bring us updates of happenings and what the situation is on the ground. Good morning, Gafudu.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. What is Benin like this morning and where you are?
Yeah, I'm currently reporting from the Kajeun Government Primary School polling station in Cotonou, where voting began at 7 a.m., although with slight delays observed in 4 other polling centers I visited earlier. So far, the process appears smooth with election materials available and officials present on site. We've seen a growing turnout of voters across most stations with some early queues forming. There have been no major incident reported at this stage, and the atmosphere remains calm with security personnel present. I also came across observers from the African Union and the ECOWAS who have, of course, refrained from making any official statement. However, the head of the African Union Observer Mission emphasized their expectation that all democratic rules be respected throughout the process. So far, this is the account I can make of what is happening here now.
It's quite interesting. What are some of the issue people are talking about and would like to see change from some of the conversations you've had with voters there or even before today?
They expect to see mostly some process. For example, I came across this member of diaspora who have to travel all the way from Rwanda to vote, because all over the world, only people, the diaspora can vote only in 4 countries. So, which is a major issue. People cannot really have exercise their right to vote when they are outside the country. And they are also expecting some major changes, especially the inclusion of the youth at all stages of the upcoming administration. So, but beside that, for the voting process itself, it's true that we haven't really experienced any incident yet. There are some disabled people that still cannot. I find it challenging to access the stations because they have to go through some steps of the rooms because everything's happening in classrooms. So they have to go through the steps of the rooms to access the station. So those are some challenges that are being reported.
All right. What is the mood among the voters this morning? What can you sense from the people that have so far turned up for the vote?
Enthusiasm. It's true that there have been like a slow turnout, but the people we came across, we had the chance to meet, we can really see some enthusiasm because we have to admit that the campaign, that was the focus of the campaign, is to have a significant percentage of turnout, and they did that well. So we can see that people are really enthusiastic and happy. Of course, the Electoral Commission issued a communique yesterday asking to close all the businesses. So all the businesses are closed this morning, but still people are determined to come out to really express their voices and their votes.
Indeed. Are you seeing party officials of these two candidates where you are?
No, at the center where I am, I'm not seeing the. I have representatives. I can see some representatives, but not yet the heads of the parties. I probably have to, when I move to the other centers later in the day, I'll probably have the chance to come across some.
I know we may be hearing from that diasporan that returned from Rwanda to vote, and I'm sure you spoke with him. What was that thing that made him to come home to vote, to be part of this election?
Yeah, first he want to vote. He want to be part of this, and the fact that there's no, first in Rwanda, there's no diplomatic representation of Benin in Rwanda, which is quite surprising because we know the good ties Benin has with Rwanda, but that there's no embassy or consulate in Rwanda is quite astonishing. But he said, he wants to express his vote, and he wants also to let the new administration know that it's very important for diaspora to have the opportunity to vote wherever they are, and they don't have to travel back to their country to vote, because everybody don't have the means to make that journey. So he's coming here is to vote, but also to share his feelings and his expectations about meeting the needs, some needs, basic needs of diaspora, to especially the electoral, the capacity to exercise their voting rights.
Indeed, Gafudu, thank you so much for the update, and do stay safe where you are, because we'll be coming to you before we end this broadcast.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, let's remind you that the electoral campaign officially ended at midnight on Friday after a largely peaceful process. Now, this Saturday is being observed as a day of electoral silence ahead of voting scheduled for which is happening today. The Autonomous National Electoral Commission welcomed the smooth conduct of the campaign and assured the public of a credible and transparent vote. Speaking earlier at the headquarters of the Autonomous National Electoral Commission in Cotonou, the election chief assured that voting materials were deployed to polling centers across the country. According to the commission, 17,400 polling stations will be set up nationwide to serve more than 7 million registered voters. In the diaspora, around 62,000 voters are expected to cast their ballots at 112 polling stations. On the security front, the electoral body assured the public that measures are in place to ensure a smooth voting process in coordination with the military, particularly in northern areas affected by ongoing security challenges. The Commission is also calling on citizens to maintain peace throughout the electoral period. Well, Sakalafia is chairperson of the Electoral Commission.
The Senate has ensured that the organization is flawless in every respect. The election materials are already in place. To the dedicated members of the Senate, your impartiality must be as solid as a rock. Let professionalism be your armor and the law your sole guiding light. Let us make this Sunday, April 12, 2026, a triumph of civic duty. May democracy triumph in all its splendor. May Benin forever bask in peace and brotherhood.
That was the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Saka Lafia, speaking there.
Now, former Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo, who is leading the ECOWAS election observation mission, held a briefing in Cotonou on Saturday ahead of the Benin's presidential vote. The meeting brought together heads of other observer missions to exchange views and agree on how best to support the electoral process.
Observing the presidential election may be considered as a mere act, but it is a valuable tool for improving the quality of elections. Our presence demonstrates ECOWAS's adherence to and preference for elections as the most appropriate means of choosing our leaders, however imperfect they may be. We have been engaging with critical stakeholders to gain a clear understanding of the electoral ecosystem and the preparations made so far for the conduct of a peaceful and smooth presidential election. This assignment cannot be executed alone, which is why I'm also happy to welcome all of you as members of the ECOWAS election observation mission. You left your countries and activities to contribute your quota in consolidating democracy in the Republic of Benin and in our ECOWAS region. I'd like to assure the good people of the Republic of Benin that the ECOWAS election observation mission will undertake a credible and forthright observation of the electoral process. I therefore implore all of you, our distinguished observers, to be guided by the fundamental principles of objectivity and impartiality in your assessment, observation, and reporting on the election process. I wish you all well in this onerous assignment for our member state and the ECOWAS region.
That was former Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo speaking there. He is currently the head of the ECOWAS observation mission, and he was just giving us an update about their role as observers for Benin Vote 2026.
Well, as we continue with the coverage, Beninese voters are heading to the polls today, and in the presidential election that goes far beyond simply choosing a new president. It is also a major test of how the country's political system has changed, at least in the last decade. Once praised as a model democracy, Benin has carried out major reforms under outgoing President Patrice Talon. Now, while the government says these changes will improve governance and bring stability, critics argue they have narrowed political space and weakened the opposition. So the big question is, will today's vote help restore trust in Benin's democracy, or will it confirm fears that the system has become far less? Christopher Aticho tells us more in this report.
Beninese voters head to the polls today to choose their next president. But this is no ordinary election. For years, Benin was hailed as West Africa's democratic success story, shaped by the landmark National Conference of 1990. Today, as President Patrice Talon prepares to step down, that reputation is being tested like never before. With only 2 candidates approved for today's ballot, the field is unusually narrow. The main opposition party, led Democrat linked to former President Boni Yaye, was excluded after failing to meet sponsorship requirements. Many ask, what kind of democracy is the country becoming? Just 4 months ago, that question became more real. On Monday, December 7, 2025, gunfire echoed through the street of Cotonou. A group of rebel soldiers seized state television and announced that Patrice Talon had been overthrown.
The Military Committee for Refoundation met today, Sunday, December 7, 2025 in Cotonou and has deliberated and decided as follows. Mr. Patrice Talon is removed from his duties as President of the Republic. Lieutenant Colonel Tigri Pascal is appointed President of the Military Committee for Rebuilding at today's meeting held in Cotonou on December 7, 2025.
For several hours, Benin appeared to be joining the long list of West African nations taken by military coup. But that evening, the mutiny had been crushed. The coup attempt failed, but it left many wondering just how deep the frustrations ran beneath Benin's surface of stability. Political analyst Visual Ahwase has been closely monitoring these developments.
Until the early 2000s, Benin was held up as a model of democracy, but I can say without being too harsh on Benin that today we are almost perfect counterexamples. In reality, what happened in Benin is that a president came to power having been democratically elected and used democratic means to change the democratic rules in order to deprive Benin's citizens of the benefits of democratic principles.
However, the critique of shrinking democratic space is firmly rejected by former Beninese Minister of Public Works and Transport, Gustave Depo Suno. He argues that Benin needed a different approach.
As far as I'm concerned, no nation has any lessons in democracy to teach another nation. President Talon has a vision. What matters most to him are the results, and he takes responsibility for them.
Reforms by the Talon government have significantly reshaped Benin's political system. Political and governance expert Jo Atayi Gidigbe reacts.
But more than the length of the term, it is ultimately the eligibility thresholds that have reshaped the new political landscape. The balance of power is so overwhelming. Perhaps it also explains why some members of the radical opposition, led by former President Yaya Boni, have begun to side with the government. The question, however, is this opportunism? Is it defeatism? Is it realism? It's complicated to say.
With competition so limited, attention is now turning to how citizens themselves will respond.
The first implication is to ask whether voters might feel disappointed, whether there might be a decline in voter turnout. With the main opposition no longer seriously in the running, can it influence the decision of its voters or even other voters? Questions remain. Will there be higher turnout or low turnout due to acceptance that the game is already over? One might get the impression that there is still a glimmer of hope or a willingness to try something, but no one knows how things will turn out.
As voting unfolds, Benin finds itself at a quiet but significant crossroad. Whatever the outcome, this election sends a broader signal, not just within Benin, but across West Africa. In the end, its real test may simply be whether Beninese citizens continue to see value in turning out and participating in the electoral process.
That was Christopher Tisho with that report there on politics and governance in Benin.
Now, in the lead up to today's crucial vote in Benin, concerns around the growing security and human rights challenges were highlighted. For nearly 10 years now, Benin has increasingly been affected by the spillover of jihadist violence from the Sahel region, resulting in deaths, displacement, and economic and social deprivation of residents in the northern region of the country. The threats culminated in a failed coup attempt in late 2025, reportedly linked to frustrations within the military over how insecurity had been handled. Usman Umar has the details in this report.
The northern parts of Benin have seen regular attacks by jihadist groups coming from the Sahel.
Since the first reported attack in 2019, armed groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State have intensified attacks in the country's northern border areas, particularly near Niger and Burkina Faso. Recent incidents have highlighted the scale of the threat, says Franklin Nosita, a senior researcher at the International Crisis Group.
You'll see large-scale assaults against Beninese military positions in the north, kind of on the borders with Burkina Faso and Niger. And the most recent of those happened, just in March 2026. So it's still very much an ongoing issue. And then there's also, I should add, growing security concerns along the border with Nigeria, especially in the area there. On the other side of the border, you have a national park, Kainji Park in Nigeria, where you seem to have several armed groups that have kind of grown a presence in recent years.
With porous borders and remote terrain allowing armed groups to operate more easily, analysts warn that northern Benin has become a new front line in the wider Sahel conflict. The deteriorating security situation has also contributed to internal tensions. First, on the economic front, despite not impacting the national GDP.
The government has declared different times and in different places curfew or banned the use of motorcycles, again, at certain places and certain times, living their lives, performing, their economic activities and things like that. And then also, I mentioned those national parks, W and Panjari. These are really huge spaces with wildlife and things like that. But it shows that that's a big, unfortunately, a big missed opportunity for Benin, because now, obviously, tourists are not going to these places. That's for the country and especially for the communities, around the parks. That's a big loss.
These conditions are seen as factors that can fuel instability and recruitment by armed groups. But despite these challenges, authorities say efforts are underway to strengthen border security, improve counter-terrorism operations, and work with regional partners to contain the threat. However, the diplomatic fallout between Benin and Niger, a member of the AES bloc, has had an impact on securing these border areas and the effective management of the crisis. The gap must be prioritized by the incoming administration.
In terms of something that can be done, not immediately, but something concrete, that the new president would focus on, I think that's probably the biggest thing. Otherwise, continuing to invest more in the military, continuing to, invest in development, maybe taking some more specific measures to promote development in the north and improve community relations. These are all good things, but they're more, I think, long-term or kind of processes, right, that you have to wait and see play out. But yeah, in terms of something very impactful, it would be to rebuild relations with Niger and Burkina Faso. And obviously, that's easier said than done. And right now, for the moment, I'm not sure that there are a ton of signs for hope on that front, to be frank, but I think a lot of people are hoping that with the new president in Benin, that even if quite close to President Talon, to improve relations.
Franklin Nosita reiterates that addressing Benin's security challenges goes beyond military responses. He advises stronger governance, respect for human rights, and long-term development policies.
The northern parts of Benin are, the least developed. At least President Talon has gotten a lot of credit for Benin's economic growth, and rightfully so. But it remains that the northern regions are least developed. There's been problems with kind of community tension. And I think the Beninese government is aware of those problems and has taken some steps toward resolving them. But, for now, I'm not sure that it's enough.
Beyond security concerns, human rights issues are also drawing attention. Reports from right groups such as Amnesty International indicate cases of arbitrary arrests and prolonged detentions, particularly in relation to terrorism-related offenses. Some detainees have reportedly spent years in pre-trial detention, raising concerns about the process and judicial efficiency.
On January 8, we saw a statement announcing this manifesto. In the statement, we argued that election candidates must commit to protecting human rights as civic space shrinks. Despite progress, women and marginalized groups face discrimination and forced evictions, jeopardizing the human rights of thousands. The right to a fair trial and access to justice are among the issues the new authorities must urgently address. The authorities continue to disproportionately restrict the right to protest. They must guarantee the right to freedom of peaceful assembly by revising the penal code, which currently criminalizes any unarmed gathering that could disturb public order.
As Benin votes today, both security and human rights remain key tests of the country's democratic resilience.
A report there by Usman Umar. Well, let's take the conversation forward as we bring on board our guests on this election coverage. Well, joining us from Accra, Ghana, we do have Dr. Kwame Sapong Asiedu. He's a fellow with the CDD Ghana. And we also have from Nigeria's Plateau State, Mr. Kopeb Dabagat. He's a regional governance expert. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the live coverage of the presidential election in Benin.
Thank you. Good morning.
Indeed.
Good morning.
I'd like to start with you, Mr. Asiedu. I mean, what are the defining stakes of this election for Benin's democracy?
Well, Benin presents a paradox. I mean, it is a democracy because obviously they vote in and out government, and they've had a history of voting in and out government. But then, if you look at it strictly, after the attempted coup that failed, and reports of arrest and the fact that the opposition candidates feel they've been stifled, there has been issues around is Benin going into a democratic backslide. But then when you come to look at the electoral trends, I mean, the different people have won elections from opposition, from incumbents and other things. But in this particular election, it looks more like it, the sitting president is trying to make sure that the current finance minister wins by hook or crook, which is in itself not a bad thing because they come from the same political stable. And obviously politicians would want to hand over, if they have to one from their stable. But then the process should not be seen to be skewed in such a way that that handover is seen as undemocratic or not free and fair. And that for me has been the biggest concern. So based on that, I'm monitoring the election to see how the Autonomous Electoral Commission, for example, would carry it out, what the West African observers would say, because as you know, CVD, we have some observers on the ground and other things. But what I am looking for today is for an open election and let the best person win, and it should be devoid of violence.
Indeed.
Now to you, Mr. Kopep, you are a governance expert. Looking at the reforms regarding Benin's presidential elections, especially the reforms that have to deal with who votes or who is to be voted for during the election, how do you view these reforms, noting that only 2 candidates made it to the ballot because some people were excluded as a result of the reforms that were introduced by President Patrice Talon?
Yes, thank you so much. I think reforms in general are always very good thing. They portend a sort of process towards making the country better, making the laws better, But these days we begin to see, it from a kind of a free-for-all angle in which governments just use reforms as a way of excluding other candidates, other parties, or the opposition, which, of course, they know that the opposition are already at a disadvantaged position, and they may not be able to meet some of the criteria being set by the new laws. And as a matter of fact, many of these laws are contrived without much consultation and inclusion in the process. Now, as a governance expert, I'm seeing these kinds of trends coming up across the belt of West Africa in every country, and it's beginning to seem as if the laws, the flaws in the laws or the gaps in the laws are providing entry points or passageways for incumbents that want to perpetuate themselves in power through either a second term or, by implanting a successor in place. It provides that leeway to them. We've seen similar laws happen in Cote d'Ivoire. We've seen, in fact, right from Senegal, that began. We've seen similar processes in Cote d'Ivoire.
Yeah.
We've seen what we can say similar processes also in Nigeria. And now there are also similar issues coming up in Benin. So, it is a trend. It seems as if it is a way of providing a passageway for the
to have the election.
Indeed. Well, Mr. Sedi, do you think this reform that Mr. Cooper is talking about has largely shaped how this election will pan out?
Well, yes. I mean, to start with, like you rightly said, only 2 candidates got onto the ballot. So that considerably increases the likelihood of a winner because a simple first past the post. If there are more people in the field, then the percentages can split, of which there could be a second round and things like that. The other thing is that you can clearly see, and like I always say, no country can make laws that absolutely block gerrymandering in politics. Even the biggest democracies haven't been able to do it. But even if you gerrymander, you need to do it in such a way that it isn't seen that you are deliberately putting impediments in everyone's way such that there will be only one winner. And that, for me, like I said earlier, is my biggest concern, because you virtually have this feeling that whichever way the election turns, the outcome is going to be that the incumbent president's wishes come through. And that cannot be right for a democracy. And for me, that's the biggest problem.
Well, Mr. Kupep, just to follow up on that, does that mean that we may see some unexpected expectation, let me put it that way, or outcome based on some of these pre-election indicators which we have noted?
I mean, well, just like my good friend Asiedu has said, the signs look very, very certain that the process is going to go in a certain direction. There are no indications that it will go in a different direction, But well, if elections are going to be conducted through the rules that appear to be guiding the elections, then perhaps we may see some surprises. As I said earlier, the opposition parties are already at a clear disadvantage, across the entire West Africa, I would say that. In this case, we see that even the laws have deliberately skewed the process in such a way that only 2 candidates were able to emerge in the presidential race, and one is a serving, a serving finance minister, and the other one is just an opposition candidate. So it is really almost certain that the vote will go the way of the president. But well, we should not close our eyes or the window for any surprises that may come up. We don't know what the people are prepared to do in this regard. So let's leave it open. The results come out.
Well, let me take you back on the general reform which you talked about, which has been adopted by several West African countries, and in fact is becoming the norm. How can we do we hail Benin's democracy, the fact that there wasn't any manipulation in the constitution to allow Patrice Talon to continue after 14 years?
Well, I don't think that is really the point we should be looking at. We should rather be looking at, how the rules have changed, not just in terms of the presidential election, but even the legislative elections. It is a whole package in which the party is further weakened by laws that have come up, before this, the laws that came up quite of recent. For example, the threshold for nominations that were given for the legislative elections, for example, that was held a few months ago. Initially, or rather, formally, it was 10% of nominations, but now of endorsements. Now it has been the bar has been raised to 15%. Okay. That affected already the party, so it weakened the opposition candidates. And now finally in the presidential, and then of course the legislative in the legislative elections, the opposition could not even secure any seats. That also has a way of affecting the strength of the party. And I take it that many of the opposition, members must have jumped ship, seeing that they will be losing out almost completely in the election. So that is a precursor. And where we are today, it has further brought down the trend such that the opposition parties the opposition party is just, they are hopeless. I think they are just holding space to ensure that
they're not left out.
All right. Dr. Asante, speaking on reforms that have been introduced by President Patrice Talon, let's look into the creation of the Senate. A lot of people are of the... Can you hear me, please, Dr. Asante?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, could you repeat the question?
Yes, I was saying, speaking about the reforms that have been introduced by President Patrice Talon, let's look at the Senate, because I've spoken to analysts who believe that the creation of the Senate is to make way for President Patrice Talon to still control the country while he is no longer in power, because this is part of the reforms that he introduced last year.
Well, yes, I mean, there have been murmurings about that. But you see, we should look at the bigger picture. Look here. There's a reason why the word democracy exists. It allows for pluralism. It allows for different voices to be heard at the national level. So in itself, when the opposition doesn't have a single member in the legislature and the Senate seems to be skewed, you worry about the democratic credentials, because technically the opposition do not have a voice. Apart from hitting the streets or holding press conferences, they do not have a voice at the table of decision making. So for me, that is a huge, huge issue. And if it so happens that President Talon is also going to be in the background, just trying to control the incoming president, then that is even going to be worse. But we have seen it a lot in West Africa where presidents tried to do that. But when the new president comes, they resist it because they want to be their own man and they've got the trappings of power. And then there is a fallout. We saw it in Democratic Republic of Congo, even in Ghana, when our two late presidents, Atta Mills and Jerry Rawlings, were around. Atta Mills was Jerry Rawlings' vice president. He handpicked him to become the running mate. He eventually became president, but they fell out because he wouldn't do things in a way and manner Jerry Rawlings wanted.
Are you seeing this happening between Wagdani and Talon?
Like I said, you never know. You see, what everyone says is, if you want to see the true colors of a man, give him power. So now that he doesn't have the full power, we cannot tell. But when he gets the full trappings of power, it will be interesting to see what the chemistry would be between the two men and whether or not they would fall out. So sometimes even the politicians themselves do not get the point that there is an inherent risk, because at the moment you have the power, so they'll dance to your tune. But when you don't have the power and it shifts to them, would they still dance to your tune? And that is what I worry about. So for me, two things worry me. The fact that there will be no opposition members at the decision-making table in the legislature, and the fact that we are not too sure whether the incoming president would play ball with the sitting President Talon.
Quite interesting analysis you have put forward there. Well, Wadani has talked about eradicating extreme poverty, bringing the population out of the poverty line. And this is someone who has been the finance minister for 2 terms of Patrice Talon. Mr. Said, what will be different when he comes in?
Well, but that we must be fair to him, because I looked at their GDP growth rate, and you would say that the national budget of Benin and the GDP has tripled under Talon. You cannot fault him. The biggest problem has been, though the economy has grown and value has grown and per capita has increased, it seems not to have trickled to the common man. So the question then becomes, would the current finance minister be able to translate the growth in the economy into real incomes in the pocket of the people? So maybe that is what he is thinking he would do. But as to whether he will be able to do it must also be answered by asking, why couldn't he do it when he was finance minister? So there are a number of questions, but you cannot say that he has been a bad manager of the economy under Talon, because the indicators point differently. Just that he hasn't impacted the population at large with the gains of the economy. And that in a democracy is also a concern. That was one of the reasons why the failed coup happened, if you all recall.
Well, we are receiving images from Benin, and we understand that the candidate of the ruling party, Wadagni, has just voted, and he has cast his ballot. And we also have seen some other people on the queue to follow suit. So it means that the election is going in very well, starting at this time. Don't forget, Benin is 1 hour ahead of Dakar, so we are trailing Benin as it is. Mr. Dabgad, let me come to you. I mean, Benin, like Senegal, has always been referred to as a beacon of democracy, one of the stable democracies, in the sub-region. Do you think going forward they will remain in that level of setting exemplary roles for country in terms of democratic practices?
Well, I would say yes. The reputation of Benin still holds up till now, but there are several concerns that are coming up, especially since the parliamentary elections, and that also would have a bearing on the eventual positioning of Benin on the democracy meter. One is the allegations about votes buying, vote stuffing, and one which even extends to this election, the current election going on, is the issue of voter apathy. We've seen. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So the issue of voter apathy, we've seen that in the last parliamentary election, the voter turnout was just barely maybe 36% or thereabout. That has dropped in a country where we used to receive 60, 70 or 80%. Again, of course, you've seen a coup that was foiled simply through the intervention of France and Nigeria. That shows that people are no longer as comfortable under the democracy as they were before. And then, most importantly, the review about on the electoral, or should I say, governance system, where a House of Senate is introduced without an indication of how that Senate would be elected. The Senate seems to be composed of past presidents and perhaps other people nominated by the president. So I think there is a shrinking or a decline of the democratic process in the country. But we have to wait for, of course, the indicators or the what I call the democracy meters to tell us, where Benin would be after this election. But clearly, we've seen a sign that democracy in Benin is dropping somewhat.
When you compare this to the scenario in Nigeria's election and to what we have, I mean, let's have your comparison. We know usually before now, 1 hour, 2 hours into Nigeria's election, there's always an incident. Either electoral officials haven't arrived at the centers or there's delay in starting. But in this case, it was very swift in Benin, especially as we heard from our correspondent there. I mean, does this also put that reputation on that, yes, indeed, they know what democracy is? Mr. Dabigat, for you, please.
Well, I would say the case of Nigeria may be slightly different, being that I'm in Nigeria and observing the process as it unfolds. The tensions in the election in Nigeria may come more or less at the primaries level, which is between this period and next, you know, and you know, because, you know, the high stakes have been shifted to the party level. I said the high stakes have been shifted to the party level, where now the competition is at that point where candidates have to jostle for, you know, for the party's nomination tickets. You know, in terms of the presidential and governorship tickets, I think most of the elections have been partially settled, given that the president's nomination seems to come up unopposed. The opposition parties, the strong parties, have been crippled by laws and, you know, some of the parties are not even going to field candidates based on how the law has affected them, you know. But these are not new laws. These are just, I would say, strict implementation of the constitutional provisions and the electoral laws, you know. So I don't think the elections in Nigeria would be much in contention. Rather, what may be more frustrating would be at the level of the party primaries, and especially the party primaries for the ruling party, where many of the people have been goaded to go and take a position. So, for Nigeria, there's no clear change laws that seem they want to change the system to a more balanced system, you know, and unfortunately, it's parties more than, and then of course, given that the party is ahead, is the one that controls this process, it is always ahead of the, you know, the changes that need to be introduced into the system.
All right.
So the opposition elected. So
okay. Okay.
Similar but a different.
Mr. Seidu, as we round off the conversation, how does this election position Benin within West Africa's democratic landscape?
Well, like I said, and if you look at the West African democratic landscape, there have been issues in Côte d'Ivoire where obviously the constitution was changed. And Nigeria, nothing like that has happened. But as was said minutes ago, the strict enforcement, even though a good thing, because I always say, if you put something in the constitution and you are not going to enforce it, the constitution becomes a toothless document. So it needs to be enforced. But when you're enforcing it in a manner that is seen to be targeted against the opposition, then there are issues as well. You look at what do you call it? Burkina Faso. There was a coup. Mali same, Guinea same. You look at Chad. You can clearly tell whether it was a palace coup between a father and son, resulting in the son becoming president and then winning a supposedly democratic election. That's a concern. Togo has its issues. Ghana, not much so, but even there are issues with occasional political party violence and also primaries and vote buying and other things, so you cannot move that away. So if you put all those into a pot, adding places like Liberia and Sierra Leone and all that, you'd say that Benin is not at the very top, but it is nowhere near the bottom. Truth of the matter is it's sliding backwards by virtue of decisions that have been taken recently under President Talon. And to be fair, we if we want to protect democracy, we also need to take soundings from the citizens. If you look at the coup that happened, everything points to the fact that there was some citizen support. And since then, voter turnout has been low. If you see that level of apathy, 64% of the voters not going to the ballot, and you think you have a robust democracy, then you must be kidding yourself. So Benin has to take these things very seriously, and they have to do something about the way its democracy is being perceived. Thank you.
Well, do you also see the opposition candidate, Humbe, making a surprise move? Because as it is, it's either yes or no, where you have two candidates. Do you see any upsets in this election from the opposition?
Normally, if an upset would happen, there's a high voter turnout because people are trooping to the ballot to kick out the incumbent. So the first indication of whether that could happen would be if there's a high voter turnout. It's too early to say that. Maybe about 3-4 hours into the election, I'll be able to predict. But if the turnout is as happened with their legislative elections, then I don't see an upset.
Okay, indeed. Well, as we round off this conversation, we want to thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Mr. Dabagat, what are you clearly expecting? What do you think will happen at the end of this election? What do you think will be singing or staying come maybe tomorrow or Tuesday?
Well, I hope to see a free and fair election. I mean, not a free and fair election. I mean, election devoid of incidents of violence, because that's what it's beginning to look like. Yeah, I think I would not miss my words that it is almost certain that the ruling party's candidate will win, but I would be glad to
see an upset.
The opposition come up with an upset.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Kope Dabagat, regional governance expert in Nigeria, and Dr. Kwame Sapong Asedu, the fellow CDD Ghana. Thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of this coverage and bringing your insight into the conversation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, as we continue in the coverage, there have been some updates, and Vero will be starting with those updates.
All right, so as today's presidential election is proceeding peacefully, so far no incidents have been reported across the country, that is in Benin, and in major cities like Bohikon, Abome, and Savalu in the central region. Our sources indicate that everything is going smoothly. For the north, in Parakou and Kandi, in the northeast, the situation is also calm. The same is true in Malanville, which borders Niger, Nigeria, and Burkina Faso. And impressive deployment of defense and security forces is ensuring smooth running of the elections so far in the border area, where attacks by armed groups in Niger and Burkina Faso have inflicted losses on the Beninese armed forces in recent weeks.
Well, in the west as well, in cities of Jogo and Natitingu, voting is proceeding smoothly from our correspondent there. The other key issue in this election is voter turnout, and it has been steadily declining in recent years. It was 65% in Patrice Talon's 2016 election. In 2021, it plummeted to 50% in his re-election. Now, both candidates called on their supporters to mobilize during the campaign. And the main opposition party, the Democrat, is not participating in this presidential election and has not issued any voting instructions to its members. All right, in case you're just joining us, this is the live coverage of the presidential election in Benin 2026, as you would want to call it, and this has been the English edition of the coverage. As we continue into the coverage, with a population size of nearly 16 million, Benin ranks as a lower middle income economy that made steady progress between 2024 and 2025. This growth can be attributed to structural reforms, port activities, and agriculture bolstered by export of cotton and cashew nuts, as well as port activities and manufacturing. However, these positive trends come with their own set of challenges. As citizens of Benin head to the polls today for a poll that will introduce a new leader, we examine the country's economic conditions, including its achievements, challenges, and prospects. Well, in this report provided by Atiye Mila.
With a population of approximately 15.7 million people, Benin finds itself at a crossroads, uncertain between impressive economic growth on paper and ongoing hardship in reality. Walking through the busy streets of Cotonou, you will see a vibrant economy in motion, markets bustling, ports expanding, and construction equipment beautifying the horizon. Under the leadership of outgoing President Patrice Talon, Benin has recorded some of the strongest economic figures in the sub-region. Economic growth has surged, reaching over 7% of GDP in 2025, and it is projected to remain above 6% this year. In January 2026, the West African state secured $1 billion through Eurobond, or a commercial loan from international support, making it the first African nation to issue sovereign debt in international markets this year. Major projects such as the Glo-Jigbe Industrial Zone aim to transform Benin from a raw material exporter into a processing powerhouse. Experts note that the government has tightened spending and reduced debt, while key sectors like agriculture and manufacturing are expanding. Isotina Jaboru, a Beninese economist, believes these efforts put the country in a positive economic trajectory.
I think that in Benin right now, the economy is performing well in recent years because the country is experiencing robust GDP growth. The GDP growth is expected to be above 7% for the next 2 years. Also, the inflation rate is under 3% and is among the lowest in West Africa right now. The government of Benin found that rather to addressing short-term problems of poverty, it's better to choose to invest in transforming structural economy.
However, beneath these statistics, a different story unfolds. For many citizens, the benefits of this growth have yet to be realized. Average incomes remain low, and the cost of living continues to rise. Increased food and fuel prices have put additional pressure on households, particularly following subsidy changes in neighboring Nigeria and the ongoing conflict involving the US and Israel against Iran. Many jobs are in the informal sector, leaving most workers without job security or social protection. While poverty is gradually declining, nearly 4 in 10 people still live in extreme poverty, according to Benin's harmonized survey on household living conditions in collaboration with the World Bank.
There is a lot to be done because in Benin, like in many countries in Africa, informal sector is dominating the economy. It makes things difficult when it comes to collect taxes. I think that this is another challenge that the country is facing. I think it is a big challenge, but a lot of work is being done, and it is another work that is still to be done in the future.
Benin is also green on the other side, as agriculture remains one of the country's key sectors. However, the West African nation is highly vulnerable to climate change, with fluctuating rainfall impacting crop yields and frequent flooding harming farmers, particularly in the northern region. Additionally, violence from extremist groups in the Sahel has created instability in the Atakura and Alibori departments, which hinders farming activities. Limited transportation networks also make it challenging for farmers in rural areas to deliver their goods to urban markets, ultimately reducing the agricultural income. It is important to note that by 2026, Benin's agricultural sector is expected to be more modern and industrialized than it was a decade ago. However, this progress has yet to fully translate into food security or higher purchasing power for most rural citizens. For Isotina Jaboru, addressing these challenges requires adequate financial and technical support from the next government and its partners.
Yes, it is a big issue. I acknowledge that it is hard. It is hard for farmers that they are not allowed to sell their product out of the country. But if we want to develop our industries, if we want to create more jobs, we cannot keep sending our products out of the country, out of the continent, because by doing that, we are contributing to create jobs in other countries. We need to develop our industry, create more jobs for young people in the country.
Beyond domestic issues, the next president of Benin will face external pressures such as regional security threats in the north and economic dependence on neighboring countries like Nigeria and Niger. As Beninese citizens cast their ballots today, they are not just choosing a leader, they are also determining the direction of their economy.
All right, there you have it. Atevin Bela with that report on Benin's economy and agriculture. Well, I'm afraid this is the much we can take on this first edition of the live coverage of the presidential election in Benin 2026. I am Imo Edet.
And I am Veronique Njai. Stay tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, as today, the whole day, we will be giving you live updates regarding what is currently happening in Benin, whether it's interview, future reports. Stay tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio.
And do join my French colleague Sunny and the team much later at the top of the hour for the continuation of the coverage in French. And many thanks to Abdullah Hassan and a team of technicians led by Maudo Juf and Mustafa Sek, who is already having his breakfast behind the glass. We'll be back at midday.
You've just listened to the live coverage of the 2026 presidential election in Benin.
Stay connected to West Africa wherever you are. Download the WADR mobile app today. Now available on Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. Listen live, catch up on your favorite programs, and stay informed with credible news from across the region right at your fingertips. Search WADR